Hello and welcome to the Klassiki Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Goff. Klassiki is your window into the world of Eastern European film. Subscribers gain access to our library of classic and contemporary titles, as well as filmmaker interviews, video introductions, program notes, and much more. You can sign up for a free trial today at klassiki.online. If you enjoy the show, don't forget to subscribe in your podcast app of choice, and remember you can always get in touch with us at podcast@klassiki.online. We have reached the end of Season 6 of the Klassiki Podcast. How the time has flown. Thank you to all our subscribers and listeners, old and new. We'll be back in the summer with another 10 episodes for you. But until then, remember to subscribe in your podcast app of choice so you never miss an episode. And please leave us a review and a 5-star rating to help us reach as many people as possible. Thank you. This week, we're returning to the archive of writing on the Klassiki Journal, which you can find at klassiki.online/journal. Today, I'll be reading an essay on one of the masterpieces of Polish cinema, Krzysztof Kieślowski's monumental Dekalog. 10 hour-long films inspired by the Ten Commandments, all set in the same Warsaw tower block complex. This is an intimate epic of everyday life, which arrived at the end of the communist era and asked penetrating questions about the spiritual and material direction of Polish society as transformation loomed. Make sure to check out the links in the show description to read the original essay and to watch one of the Dekalog films, a short film about love, on Klassiki now. The apogee of communist-era Polish cinema came at its very end. The final decade of party rule was marked by both brutality and opportunity. The 80s began with the imposition of martial law and ended with the victory of the Solidarity Union movement in the elections of 1989. Economic and moral crises seemingly went hand in hand. The nation's post-war history was reconsidered afresh in daring films that often fell at the hands of the censors. It was in this context that Krzysztof Kieślowski delivered his Dekalog, an intimate epic of everyday life inspired by the Ten Commandments that transcended both political activism and scriptural trappings to hint at something truly universal. As if he were aware of just how quickly the world was turning beneath his feet, Kieślowski worked at a frightening and self-destructive pace, completing 12 films in the space of a year. By the time most domestic audiences saw Dekalog, the Polish People's Republic had ceased to exist, following revisions to the constitution in December 1989. By the time it made its way to Western Europe a year later, Lech Wałęsa was president. After the fall of communism, Kieślowski produced his final features in France, The Double Life of Veronique in 1991, and the Three Colours trilogy, released as Red, White and Blue across 1993 and 94. Dekalog is thus the apotheosis of his Polish career, and in more ways than one. It's the grandest expression of his concern for the ordinary citizens of the People's Republic, but it also attempts a level of philosophical inquiry that was new even for Kieślowski. It picks up the social critique of his 70s films, while moving ever further away from outright political condemnation. There's something of his earliest documentaries in its attention to the detail of everyday life, combined with an unusual degree of stylized visual beauty. Stanley Kubrick famously declared the series a masterpiece, writing that Kieślowski and co-author Krzysztof Kieślowski have the very rare ability to dramatize their ideas, rather than just talking about them. They do this with such dazzling skill, Kubrick wrote, that you never see the ideas coming, and you don't realize until later how profoundly they have reached your heart. Kieślowski was instrumental in Kieślowski's mature career and a driving force behind Dekalog. A trained lawyer, Kieślowski met the director while consulting on, and eventually co-writing, his 1985 feature No End, about the martial law era trial of a Solidarity organizer. That film also saw the introduction into Kieślowski's orbit of the composer Zbigniew Preissner, who would score Dekalog and the director's French features. The official response to No End was savage. We really got a thrashing over it, was Kieślowski's later recollection, following on from the banning of the director's previous feature, Blind Chance, made in 1981 but released only in 1987. Determined to avoid overt political themes, writer and director cast around for more allegorical material. It was the devout Catholic Pisiewicz who landed upon the idea of a contemporary reimagining of the Ten Commandments. Crucially, the series was made for Polish television, but funded by West German investors, a sign of the comparative licentiousness of the late 80s, which afforded writer and director the room to breathe that the weighty concept demanded. In its final form, Dekalog consists of 10-hour-long episodes, stylized with Roman numerals, each of which is nominally related to one of the biblical commandments. Episodes 5 and 6 were later expanded into 90-minute feature films titled A Short Film About Killing and A Short Film About Love, respectively. All 10 episodes are set in the same Warsaw tower block complex with an overlapping ensemble cast. The 10 episodes had originally been intended for 10 different directors, but Kieślowski found himself unable to relinquish control over the project. He did, however, make sure to hire a different cinematographer for each film, with only Piotr Sobocinski returning for 2 episodes. As a result, the same setting becomes refracted through a range of visual palettes and compositional styles. In truth, it's easy to overstate the importance of Dekalog's biblical framing device. While some commandments, thou shalt not kill in film 5, thou shalt not covet thy neighbour's goods in film 10, are tackled directly, the relevance of others to the on-screen drama is far from obvious. The understated tension between Pisiewicz's more committed religiosity and Kieślowski's cool humanism keeps every scenario engaging over the 10-hour-plus runtime of the full series. Viewed as a whole, the clarity of conception and execution displayed by the writing-directing partnership is remarkable. 10 perfectly realised episodes of human comedy and tragedy, each standing alone while also working in symbiosis with the next. The 2 short film about features demonstrate that each of the stories told here could be extended forward or backward in time, without losing their power. In Dekalog 2, 2 characters share the telling exchange. Interesting block, says one. Like any other, comes the reply. Everyone has a story to tell, and so on. In other words, the local resides in the universal, and vice versa. And that is the significance of the scripture to Kieślowski and company. If the director arrived at this philosophical stance in part as a result of the political pressures of the 80s, then it was also an organic endpoint to his evolving fascination with the quotidian life of communist Poland. Kieślowski had initially planned to make a career in non-fiction, and from 1968 until 1980, he made more than 20 documentary shorts, TV films, and features about the working lives of ordinary Poles. From the direct interview style of 1977's From the Night Porter's Point of View to the experimental sociology of 1980's Talking Heads. The censorship that certain of these films were subjected to helped to convince Kieślowski to abandon documentary for fiction, as he saw it, a more refined medium for truth-telling in an authoritarian state. His first fiction features, from Personnel in 1975 through to No End, are often considered part of a loose grouping of critical voices that emerged in the second half of the 70s, later dubbed the cinema of moral anxiety, which included the likes of Agnieszka Holland and Krzysztof Zanussi. Again, provincial settings and unremarkable protagonists were key to the minor-key discontent of the moment. The richness of Dekalog resists easy summary. Every viewer will have their favourites among the huge ensemble cast. The series opens with one of its most heartbreaking episodes, about the linguistics professor and amateur computer programmer Krzysztof, whose indoctrination of his precocious son into the world of scientific reason fails to prevent bitter misfortune. Death haunts many of the episodes, 1, 2, 5, 7, 8, and 9, as does the spectre of romantic dissolution. In episode 1, Krzysztof and his wife are separated, Elsewhere, infidelity and empathetic ellipses proliferate throughout the tower block. The entanglements of romance and family tend to prompt moral reckoning in Kieślowski's world. The problem of proving maternity hangs over Dekalog 4. In Dekalog 2, the violinist Dorota ponders an abortion while her ailing husband teeters on the brink of death. Dorota's dilemma is restated diegetically by the ethics professor Zofia in episode 8, which also raises the spectre of the Holocaust, never far from the minds of post-war Polish artists. Throughout, Kieślowski avoids easy judgment of his characters. In 1988, he made a statement to critic Bożena Janiczka that all of my films are made as if through glass, which captures not just the proliferating windows of the tower block through which we glimpse the lives of its inhabitants, but also his sense of cool remove from the intensity of the emotional turmoil behind each front door. The sheer range of the human drama on display is encapsulated in the 2 short film expansions. A short film about killing is Kieślowski at his most brutal. The murder of a taxi driver by a young drifter named Jacek, played by Mirosław Baka, is recorded in unbearable detail, as is the agony faced by the criminal's idealistic lawyer Piotr, played by Krzysztof Kieślowski, in the face of the death penalty handed down to his client. Conversely, a short film about love is almost shockingly tender in the face of human frailty. 19-year-old Tomek, a wan Olaf Lubashenko, is an orphaned postal worker who rents a room from his best friend's mother. Each night at 8:30, he watches through a telescope as the beautiful 30-something Magda, played by Grażyna Szapalowska, a resident of the neighbouring tower block, brings home a succession of different men. Erotic fixation soon turns to ardent adolescent love, and Tomek haplessly attempts to bridge the physical and emotional distance between himself and Magda, intercepting her mail, intruding on her liaisons. Once the pair meet, however, and the weight of Magda's romantic cynicism makes itself felt, Tomek is forced to confront the devastating gap between ideal and reality. The narrative structure that Kieślowski deploys here clearly recalls Alfred Hitchcock's gripping study of voyeurism in Rear Window, as well as the genre thrills of his postmodern disciple Brian De Palma. But Kieślowski's own humanism overwhelms the potential seediness of the Tomek-Magda relationship. As critic Eric Hines notes, it's through his confusion over closing the distance that Tomek transgresses, but he's never guilty of watching. Lubashenko and Szapałowska give 2 of the finest performances in the director's oeuvre, and together with cinematographer Witold Adamik, Kieślowski finds the melancholic beauty rather than the grubbiness of the tower block, all blue and red light and autumnal chill. In the original series, Dekalog 6, the episode about this relationship, ends abruptly, with Tomek renouncing his love for Magda. The expanded film version, a short film about love, allows us more time with Magda in the aftermath, as she begins to mirror Tomek's former fascination with her, leading to a stunning climactic scene in which the pair encounter one another in a rarefied moment of recognition. What Hines calls the love of pure empathy, that asks only for the privilege of seeing its object, and that requires not even an acknowledgement of its active gaze. Tomek's telescope makes literal Kieślowski's notion of filming through glass. Tomek and Magda's story, along with all the others that make up Dekalog, demonstrate that the object of Kieślowski's pure empathy was nothing less than Polish society itself. That was The Moral Maze of Krzysztof Kieślowski's Dekalog, written and read by Sam Goff. You can find this and other essays, companions and watch lists on our journal at klassiki.online/journal. Make sure to check out the links in the show description to find the original essay, to watch a short film about love on Klassiki Now, and for more material on Kieślowski.